Welcome. Glad to have you here. Welcome. Got some really fiery energy going right now. Got some real presence to tune into. I invite you to be aware of this. Ground yourself a little extra today. Be willing to let go of things you think you need that you don't really need. Be willing to let go of things you know you want to let go of, but you've been trying too hard. So you've become it too deeply to easily release. Be willing to let go of dreams that don't fit in the future, that you have your ego invested in, like, I should do that, or I failed. Be willing to let go of dreams from your past that really, it's obvious. It's not you. It's not what you need, but you somehow wove yourself in there. And every time you get a new bit of energy, you're like running back to the past to try to redeem that one thing before you move forward, and back ruins it. Be willing to let go of the idea that you're a good person based in standards that make other people bad people, based in patterns where you're dumping negative energy on them. Be willing to let go of the idea that this is all there is, that this life, you live, you die, then nothingness. It's complete bullshit. It's the biggest lie. Be willing to let go, allow to leave people who no longer belong in your life. Respecting that you're making choices to become something, and you have to give people space to make their own choices. Be willing to let go of the idea that it's up to you what other people do. Be willing to let go of your fear of loneliness that keeps you from choosing what you really need, because the people around you might leave. How many ways are you avoiding deep choices because of the might, the maybe? This is an impossible thing to control. Be willing to let go of this sense of control. It's false. It's not good for you. Be willing to let go of this disrespect that you may hold for other people, that they need you to make their choices for them, essentially, even if they have essentially nominated you to be this in their life. Be willing to let it go. Be willing to let go of the idea that you're the spiritual person and other people aren't. Be willing to let go of the idea that you're the sick person and other people are well, when they won't even dive into the challenges and changes you're willing to embrace. Be willing to let go. Let go. Allow to leave everything that is not love. Welcome, Angie. Glad you're here. Kinsey, thank you so much. Bless you in your heart. Love be with your family this week, Kinsey. Misty, I'm so glad you're here. Tom, grace and blessings be with you, my dear friend. Trevor, good morning to you. Elora, love, prayers, presence. Bless your living soul, taking on the world. Jean, hello to you. I'm so glad to see you. Been a bit. It's great to have you all here. It's great to have you all here. First of all, I've broken through. I have made some really wonderful changes lately, and I'm ready to take on more. So I want you to know, if you need support, I'm freeing up more space in my schedule. So I'm making more session times available, and I want to expand it. And during times of expansion, I'm willing to offer, I've got a discount for those of you who are watching the class, hear this message, and want some support. I'd really like to take this further and say, if you know someone with a strange, unusual challenge that they don't know how to face, that they haven't been able to get help with elsewhere, bring them. I've never been as tapped in. I feel a breadth of hope and potential that runs deeper than anything I've known. I've got a lot more support than I ever have, and I want to help. So these are phenomenal tools and insights that can often help in situations where people are trapped, extreme physical challenges, extreme, mental, emotional things that don't make sense, that get diagnosed, pathologized. Hey, of course, there's no guarantee. A lot of this work amounts to finding a way to help people reignite their own inner inspiration. And if people don't know how to do that, there's not much anyone can do to help them. And someone who's ready for a similar kind of challenge, bring them here. Balance is an incredible thing. Today, I'd like to do a couple examples with some of you folks before we do the readings in the sanctuary. For those of you who don't know, we have a membership space where we do readings at 11. The readings are designed around a meditation we share, and then everybody gets to learn from each other's ability to recognize their own message. The goal is to get you more and more capable of understanding how to talk to your own spirit, and I can help be guidance, training wheels for that to a certain extent. We share it in a closed space, which is phenomenal. It's much more influential and effective than it has been in the past. I'm sorry to not be sharing it here in a more open forum. The open forum really, it took away from what's possible. So if you have any interest, if you missed the readings and you've been here in the past, please shift on over. I also invite you to sort of ask yourself a question like, how much do you need support today? Because I'd like to take a couple examples to help you tune in to your edge. So first, we're going to lay the terms in a certain extent. Too much, bad. Too little, bad. Period. That's it. That's all. It's not a very complicated idea, right? However, I can't tell you how many contexts in which people polarize within ourselves. So we go through a certain kind of experience and we identify that as a thing. And then we create our life in relation. Put another way, if you grew up in the excruciating heat, you might come to hate heat. And so you move to a place that's colder and you're just always avoiding heat. If you grow up cold, where your parents turn down the heat regularly because they don't have enough money and it's in a wintry location, you might grow up with a sense of scarcity and fear that makes you constantly keeping the heat up high. But heat and cold are both detrimental. You could go too hot, you could go too cold. That's obvious at the extremes, right? Well, as simple as this lesson is, I can teach my 6-year-old son to recognize it. I invite you to take a deeper look at yourself and ask if there are ways in which you're doing this in your own life. Essentially, you have defined one end of a polarity as a bad thing and the other as a good thing, when realistically, it's your own patterns that are kind of addicted to an older way of being, and you're trying to mediate them like this. And what it essentially amounts to is riding the brake. Like you're driving, but you're also got the brake on. Everybody can see it in this metaphor. You don't want to drive with the brake and the gas on at the same time. But spiritually, I can't tell you how often people are living their lives like this. Your edge is experienced in this balance. You strive too much, you push too much, you're going to fry yourself. And what that means is you will lose the ability to be aware of your senses in the kind of ways that makes a better life. If you've taken yourself beyond the ability to recognize basic sensations, that's not achievement. Now, great. Look, if you have to run 26 miles to get away from a foreign army, okay, great. Congratulations. I'm glad you could do it. But if you're regularly frying your senses in a way that you cannot be present in the world, you can't taste properly, and you experience your own body's messages as something to push through, you've lost something crucial about living a good life. Similarly, if you are playing it so safe, you are avoiding certain challenges because you've gotten hurt there in the past, you're going to succumb to lethargy and depression. There's no other way, because you are essentially saying no to life, and you're not even willing to come near a zone, an area of challenge that's crucial to living. When we don't have challenge in our life, something stops moving. Stagnant water is where mosquitoes lay their eggs. Mosquitoes don't lay their eggs in water that's moving because the eggs get moved and crushed. Stagnant water is where rot emerges. And that's true within ourselves. You have to get water moving through you. You have to get a wild, flowing spiritual fire. Flowing. It has to flow through you. And finding the ways in which you have locked down and identified something as no, right in the path of the life that you need. This is what healing is. So first of all, we got to agree on this. When you conceive of a good life, what are you doing? I would put to you that many people are simply creating vectors. Like they're just sort of pointing in a direction and saying that way, without explicitly recognizing there's always an edge in there. I am doing my best to define some boundaries that everyone can embrace and come to terms with. And sometimes that works in a discipline, a commitment and a discipline. So here are the basics of it. You really, 3 significant practices a week, spiritual practices a week, are necessary to keep your flow going. Basically every other day, you need to have some dedicated spiritual time. And I encourage everyone to start with 20 minutes. That is a basic foundation. If you don't have that much, you're really likely to get into spiritual lethargy. However, I don't encourage you to go much beyond an hour during those 3 times. Much beyond an hour, you could start basically spinning your wheels. Yeah, you're making progress in terms of going deeper on something, you're learning more, but your time might well be better spent doing something else. An hour of efficient, focused work through a yogic spiritual practice is going to tune you into a much healthier life. And after that, it would be better if you started to, harvest some of the fruit of your labor, go out and enjoy your time, do more focused, efficient work at whatever your work is in life, do more joyful, do more joyfulness with your family. Start considering, perfecting practical things like cleaning more or finishing little chores around the house that you haven't completed. This is the kind of transition I'm going through in a maturity. I'm 49. I'm thinking about what it's going to be 50. And I'm thinking into the maturity to really stop overemphasizing things that don't need more of my attention and start focusing in on this broad perspective of priority in life. We can experience this through our practice, and our practice brings us to an edge only when it's in balance. Balance means you're never defining one particular goal as sort of one-pointed in a way that drowns out the rest of your experience. So when I am striving too much in one way, my system, my body, my spirit, and my mind are going to give me messages that I'm losing in other ways. And what I'm losing at first is just the ability to recognize. So if my mind starts getting more frantic, it's a good idea to stop and question, like, what's going on? If my body starts giving me weird signals, seriously, I'll start weird. If you start getting feelings that are weird in your body that you've never felt before, it's a good idea to adjust in relation to those signals. That doesn't mean you have to stop, but it means become aware of them. Integrate your perception of them. In a minute, I'm going to share something just what I find to be incredible about the physical dialogue between body and spirit. Before I do, I want you to consider something just really, really basic here. Whether or not you're trying too hard, you might believe that success comes from a state of being that is essentially trying too hard, as if more is always better. The more monster comes in many forms, my dear friends. The more monster comes in many forms. And sometimes the more monster takes over your conception of what it is to live a good life, your conception of what it is to succeed. And when it does, you need to learn to recognize it. This is one of the first rules. Now, if I were to tell you, in order to learn to drive a car, you got to learn to use your brake. That's obvious, right? Well, I would like you to treat this as just as important a concept. As you're being ushered into a deeper, yes, indeed, deeper level of spiritual presence, I want you to prioritize learning to understand what a brake is. Now, the reason this is so crucial is because we have countless examples of people who just push and push and push and push and push and are extolled for it. They're revered for it. Again and again, I have been taught and given different examples of people who the more they pushed it, the more respect they got. You know, I went to study with someone who had fasted for 45 days. And to me, this was, as a young man, this was like my measure, right? Like that was in his spiritual resume. And I was like, okay, yeah, I want to be able to do that. Jesus level fasting here, right? And I had a very difficult time. And it was really hard for me to get my awareness around the concept that I could criticize this person, because I'd identified them as so far beyond me that it was difficult for me to sort of give myself the self-respect to say, wait a second, I think there's something a little off about this. And then later I met someone else who'd fasted for 44 days, ironically. And the guy was just clearly out of balance. And after a year or so of being close to him, and he was like deferring to me regularly. I'm like, what is going on with this person? I mean, he's fasted for 44 days. Why is he like asking me questions? And he reveals to me that at one point he had gotten so angry at his marriage that he had choked his wife, like badly. And it was, first of all, respect for sharing that with me. But second of all, he didn't ever really fully heal it. He still had some degree of self-justifying in it. And it was really illuminating for me to bring together the concept that somebody who could fast for 44 days still had such an awful, straightforward problem. Be present with that. Do you have a concept of enlightenment, realization, or some kind of finality? Do you have that? Do you have a concept of spiritual growth that's sort of done? Like there's a threshold in which you're just somehow immune to all sorts of other measures of what it is to be just a decent person. I believe we're all coming out of an era when many people were able to push the extremes so deeply that they were not even forgiven. They were able to justify huge ranges of just awful behavior, behavior that's just straightforwardly not healthy. Sleeping around too much, taking too much money from people, being selfish and rude, forcing other people to change their opinions all the time, thinking that they're immune to criticism, just like all sorts of stuff that it's like in most contexts, we'd be like, that sucks. But if they're able to fast for 44 days, suddenly they become immune to criticism. These two things have nothing to do with each other. Now, why are we focusing on them? Because fasting for 44 days is not necessarily your edge. Most of you could learn to do it. That's my premise. I fasted for 14 days. When I fasted for 14 days, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I could keep going. Being over your edge doesn't mean you're going to die. It just means you're past the point where you're being productive as a human being, spiritually healthy. I'm not saying some people might not need to do that. It might be in their path to be that extreme. But explicitly defining your own edge in terms of these extremes could be terrible. Here's this beauty, all right? Your edge might not be extreme. I want you to sit with that. In most cases that I've found, people are trying to go past their edge. Their idea of what it would be to be healthy and successful is actually, they've staked their concept of what they're aiming for well beyond their own edge. And the reason this is detrimental is you don't know what it would be like to be there. If you stake your idea of where you want to be too far past where you are in a certain respect, you don't even know what it's going to feel like. Now, I'm not saying don't have big goals, but be really honest with yourself about where you are. If you spend the next 3 years suffering to try to train yourself to run a marathon, but you don't enjoy it, that's not living on your edge. That's living past your edge. If you take the next 3 years to learn to run a marathon, but you do it in a way that's conscious, and most days you're enjoying the work, that's living on your edge. There is joy in every day when you're living on your edge. Your edge is just the balance between what you're actually capable of now and what you are best able to become. Best able to become. That's it. And when these forces are in balance, when these tensions and possibilities are in balance, there's this zone. You've heard of the zone. Like athletes will talk about getting in the zone where you are drawn into how to be. And you get into a depth where just contemplating doing the wrong thing will make you tense. I want you to be present with this. Be present with this as a goal. The goal is to be so in tune with yourself that just thinking about doing something that's not good for you will make you tense in a way that you'll receive and be like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. The other day I was tired at the end of the day in a grumpy way. I was tired and grumpy, right? And I went to the fridge to grab a beer, and I started to feel a little sick. And I was like, oh, this is not a beer evening. I definitely don't drink every day. And sometimes I don't drink every week. And when I do, it's usually one, occasionally more. And there's a nuance to it. You drink alcohol is a poison. Alcohol will kill off things in you. When it's the right time to kill off things in you, you do it. This kind of thinking is what it's crucial. It's required in how to live on your edge. You don't just take things and say, this is bad, this is good. People do this all the time, right? They smoke pot every day for 10 years, and then they say, I'm done with smoking pot. And then they tell everybody how bad pot is, right? You've seen this. Alcohol is even more extreme. All you're doing is say yes and then no dramatically. To live in a space where you're able to make daily decisions that aren't blown away by the forces involved, that's living on your edge. To live in such a way where you're engaging your practice. I'm bringing it back to yoga here. You engage your practice with a balance of strength, endurance, and flexibility. You're just not prioritizing any one of those three. So if you do too many push-ups, you're going to get really stiff in your upper back and you will lose flexibility. If you emphasize flexibility too much, you're going to stretch yourself out in a way that you're going to start resist doing anything strength-oriented. If you emphasize flexibility too much, you're going to strive in a way that makes you unhappy. And it generates a different kind of mental tension. If you emphasize endurance too much, and I promise you this is true, you will push yourself. If you emphasize endurance past your limits for more than an hour, you put your body in a state where it is essentially saying, we're in terror. We have to keep going in order to survive. We're running away from the enemy, the wolf pack, the polar bear. And we've got to keep going in order to survive. So it starts sucking life force from your critical organs. So, okay, good job. You achieved that, but understand it comes at a consequence. You don't want to exercise hard more than an hour every week. Now, by all means, do it like as a challenge, like running the marathon or whatever, but you don't want to build it into your life to do that every week. If you put endurance at that higher level, you will start depleting your power in other areas of your life. So the goal of understanding your edge well is to learn how to prioritize these balances without drowning in them. Because one possible response could be like, oh God, this is too much for me. How can I keep all these things in track, right? So healthy edge work is about self-honesty. What do you really need? And how are you really doing? The balance between that's where your edge lives. The beauty is your edge has a presence because when you're in your edge, you tune in more intently. Each thought has more value. Each sensation has more communication. So your sensations begin to tune into each other and harmonize. And when I do this in a practice, I get in this flow state. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I'm telling you, anyone of any physical capacity can do it. It's not about how far you go in any one thing. And again, your practice is a metaphor for your life. Being at your edge in life is not about how extreme your success is in any one area. Nobody throws a party when you own a pose. Nobody throws a party when you break through certain challenges unless you do it. You have to make it. It's not intrinsic. You have to create the joy of success for like specific goals that you might take on. But the edge gives you its own reward. The edge is a party. And what that means is when you're living in your edge, which is the balance between what you really are capable of and what you're trying to become, it has its own joy the whole way along. And when you start to lose that joy, there's this window where you can use the tension that emerges as a self-correction. It shows you how to tune back in. But if you get too used to numbing out those messages, if you get too used to numbing out the message from your body that it doesn't like what you're doing, if you get too used to numbing out the message from your heart that it would like to go spend some time with your family, it doesn't want to do another hour of that. If you get too used to numbing those things out, it becomes a different kind of condition. It becomes a condition. You've normalized ignoring your own messages. And that's what leads to lethargy and depression or burnout. So please understand, the balance between these two extremes is a different kind of dimension. You tune in the balance, we could go so far. So in the next half, I want to answer questions in a way that like you become a little bit of a case study. So we try to define elements of your life that help you identify and trust your own edge. So you're pushing yourself more than perhaps you're used to, and you're pushing yourself less than perhaps you're used to. You find where to push and how to push, if you know what I mean. Jelly bean. Kinsey. That's it. That's it. It's like shoulders they're a wonderful place to register it. Wonderful place to register it. The chakras themselves are the best form of communication I know about this stuff, because wherever you're feeling on a spiritually attuned level is telling you something right away, right? It's sorting all the message into one of 12 different categories to emphasize. So if my attention is drawn to my shoulders, I'm immediately saying potential that I'm taking on the wrong burden or a burden that contradicts my truth, and potential that I'm imbalanced. So my boundaries with that aren't right. So maybe it's not a burden I have to get rid of, but I have to reconsider how I'm approaching the burden. So right away, boom, you know what to focus on, you know what to think about. Super powerful. And if you just forge through, as many people do, you're just going to get this tension on your shoulders that it's like you've numbed out a whole dimension of awareness about what you're doing, and there's no chance that you're going to be at your best. You might accomplish stuff, might be valuable, you might make money, you might get success in the world, but no chance are you going to really live in joy doing it that way. And make no mistake, one of the surest signs that you're not living in your true edge is that you have identified success as something that comes after something you do in the future. Look, there is a reward for success that comes after some achievement, but that cannot outweigh what you're feeling today. This is basic spiritual maturity in a real way. You need to be feeding yourself from the joy that's available right now. And if you think that just taking this and putting it in the future is somehow going to be the intrinsic motivation for success, oh God, like it's a terribly restrained, constrained, well below your potential way to live. All right. I hope I've made that point. Well, let's get more engaged. Does anybody have a question about these themes or are willing to put yourself on the hot seat, so to speak? That makes a lot of sense, Sarah. And really, we need the balance in it. And for what it's worth, I just posted this sun surrender practice yesterday, which is the best antidote to those things possible. It is a really awesome challenge. It's just under an hour, which is an ideal amount of time for a strong practice, in my experience. And it's the only way to achieve it well is to balance strength, endurance, and flexibility. So you need all of those things. And if you find yourself, like one thing people do is try to go too deep in every pose. If you try to go too deep, you're stretching into it, but then you got to come out of it. And likely as not, the way you stretch in involves force, contradictory force. So for instance, the habit that I have most difficulty breaking is that I carry tension in my upper chest, that in up dog, I push into it too much. So the tension's there, and then I push at it, so I make a double problem. And so the solution to that is for me to acknowledge my upper chest is tight. It comes from weightlifting and overemphasizing being strong in the past. My upper chest still carries this. So my edge is before that point. Don't keep pushing at it, because when I push at it, all my attention ends up vortexing in the tension here. I lose my awareness of lines of energy through my legs, into my core, up through my shoulders and arms. And when I lose my awareness of that, I've numbed out my highest potential. So this practice really exposes it for me. And when I engage it again and again and again as a teacher, show me where my attention's drawn, help me to understand and diagnose why, it really reveals to me, okay, don't do that. So for instance, another thing I do a lot is I twist my neck too much. This comes from too much headiness. And I keep, thinking I could get deeper into a pose. You can get a little deeper when you twist your neck, right? But honestly, you can just not twist your neck in poses. Like even in twists, don't twist your neck. It accomplishes not so much, but it can, well, certainly for me and other people like me, the second you go too far, now you're just aware of your throat and neck. I could be aware of my throat and neck for like 20 minutes. And then after the practice, even because I spent all my time straining to look that way. And if I'm left with that tension, I'm not aware of the rest of my body. So just don't even do it. My edge is not to push into my up dog and not to over twist my neck. Just learn to gesture. My gestures, like I do reverse triangle and triangle. And I'm just like, okay, keep my head squared here. Just look, just like that. And I feel this impulse to like go further. And my edge is to say no to that. And so success comes when I complete the whole practice and I just feel great. And my neck doesn't feel tense. And no one gives a shit that I didn't twist a little further in that pose. Now, forgive me if you feel like this is like a sidetrack. Think about this as a metaphor. Identifying where you put a little too much energy into something on a consistent basis could free you up to tune into your own life force much more honestly, which gives you the intuition to make better decisions in most areas. It's incredible how much can be unlocked when you accurately identify where you might be consistently doing something off, making mistakes that they numb you to who you really are. Acute locational pain is, yes, absolutely. So, but here's the thing about it, all right? I just had an incredible breakthrough these past 2 weeks. It's part of why I'm so like churning and like, bring it on, world. And let me tell you how it's worked. This is just next level stuff. I'm more confident in this work than I've ever been because of this breakthrough. About 4 or 5 times in the past 10 years, one of my knees have given out. And it's given out in a way that's just, it's awful. Like I'll go through a week to a month of having to ice it and having fevers. Once it was a month, a little over a month. And multiple times it's like a week, I can't walk. Every time before it happens, I have an acute locational, it's not pain yet. At first, it's just a strong sensation. And when I've had it, each time I've had this sense of like superhumanness, like I'm ready to go to the next level. And this is a transformational spirit coming into my body, and I need to trust it. 2 weeks ago, same thing happened again. And part of me went into terror. So here's the first thing. When you get an acute focused sensation that's out of the norm, you need to be willing to adjust with it. That's the premise, the most important thing I want to communicate. Pushing through it when you don't know what it is a bad idea. Very bad. I know that doesn't go with sports or whatever, but trust me on this. What you do is you tune to it. And a couple of things happen. You basically say, this sensation is my teacher. Well, what does that mean? You want to find a way that you have any degree of influence over it. So one thing people often do is if they have an acute, strong sensation they never had, they avoid that. But in avoiding it, you might really debilitate yourself. You might really like undermine your own ability to engage challenges. So you want to touch it. You want to come next to it and feel it and learn about it. All of that happens when you're basically giving that new sensation the credibility to change you. Last week, I went from terror that this sensation was going to turn in the same old thing to I surrendered my resistance to it. And my resistance to it was a whole set of sense of who I am, this root, it's in my leg and my knee, root energy of my identity with community and tribe, basically over-identified with sort of more like free from constraint, responsibility, smoking pot and the wild kind of energy. And I had to say no to that. Now, I haven't been living like that for a while, but I had to say no much more clearly. And when I did, I changed what that sensation was, not by changing the sensation. I changed my response to the sensation. But you can't change your response to a situation within yourself unless you allow it to change you, right? Basically, don't just push through shit. Don't just push through a weird feeling. Get to know it. Because maybe it's your body saying that's my limit. Well, if it is, as you gracefully get closer to it, you're gonna feel it. It's gonna be saying, no, no, no. There's a specific kind of communication that your body has when it's trying to get you to just not do something. But if you edge, you just want to like try to evoke the littlest version of the feeling possible by just touching it and become curious enough to try to do that, you might get a different kind of message. And that's the message I got. Message I got was I'm ready to go to this total next level. So last week I did an edge practice. Now I posted just sections of it with some monologue about what was going on in my approach to the practice. But basically I pushed 12 vectors of yoga into the hardest poses I could do. And I was much more successful than I anticipated. Now, there were boundaries within myself saying, don't do that. And I pushed through those boundaries. And I was able to do that by edging closer to them and asking, what is this boundary? Do I need this boundary? What is this boundary? Do I need this boundary? It tells you. The knowledge is within you. You just have to be willing to get close, and not just run away from anything unusual, and certainly not just push through something that's unusual. All right, I missed some talk. So, Misty, the question really is, we call things pain sometimes that the intrinsic thing that's happening might not be pain. So here's what happened. I did something, I'm not going to go show you impulsively, but I did something that I don't do often, which is I started practicing. I really want to be able to stand just on my head and lift my hands up and just balance just on my head. And I can do it for brief moments, particularly in the grass, because it has a little divot. So I can like bring my hands up and touch them and bring them down. It's kind of scary. And there's definitely, I carry a sense of like, that's where like your neck could snap, right? So I practiced this for the first time in a while last week. And I did the whole rest of my practice. I was really successful. But when I was done, I was in terror. Like I was carrying terror in my body that I had damaged my neck. And so, okay, what is it? First, I was thinking this is pain. It could have been pain. Like, it's weird to think this, but like I'm tuning in and I'm like, my mind could have identified this as pain. Now, the only way this works is if you treat this a metaphor for life, all right? It works this way. So I'm tuning into this energy and I'm like, damn it, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I'm feeling my neck. I'm like rotating, but the sensation was not changing the way it would if like my body was damaged. You know, like you can tell, like if you put your finger in a cut, like it's your body screams, ah! You know, it's like, it's clear. And I'm like, this sensation was not responding the way I would expect a physical response would. So I edged in and I edged in and I got really still. And I felt the presence of a yoga teacher who was very influential on me, who was very gentle about the neck. And I was really helpful in a lot of ways. She's the one that taught me this, like just gesture with the neck. It's valuable. But she was honestly, it's weird. She taught us some of the most ridiculously difficult stuff, but she just wouldn't touch headstands. So I'm like tuning in and I'm like, what if this is not real? This is an idea. I have embodied her boundaries on how to treat my neck. What if it's really not my physical self? And I tune in and I began to differentiate it. And I felt it like it was just like an energy pattern overlaying me. And I did my hanging bow. I don't know if you've seen this. I have a short of it. My son filmed it. It's really cool. It's an intense pose from a pull-up bar. And I did my hanging bow, which greatly opens the neck. It's really good after headstands. And it all disappeared. Everything about that pain, what I thought was pain, disappeared. Now, the primary lesson I want to communicate this is pain isn't pain isn't pain. Things we think of as pain are not necessarily pain. And often the way it masquerades as pain is because we are resisting something that's actually good. But if we just bundle it up and say that's pain, stop it, we stop our progress. There are so many ways in which people do this in life. So many ways in which people do this in life that it feels like it's painful to go into a particular direction. But because we weren't willing to sit next to that sensation and learn about it, we don't learn about it. And we don't learn to decode that it's not one thing happening. There is a positive process trying to happen. There is our old self freaking out. There is our ego being terrified that it's going to die and life won't be meaningful. There's a bunch of things happening. There's us crossing a boundary that we put in place because we think that boundary keeps us safe. You have to kind of unravel what's happening, but you can't do that unless you're willing to touch it. So for instance, I had this weird sensation below my knee. Now, the most common way it evoked is if I was kneeling and then I got up from the kneeling. So what did I do? I kneeled and I supported myself well, and I tried to find, where does that sensation start to happen? Huh, huh, huh. Just hang out, be fascinated by it. And I started to learn. You tune into a sensation, it's going to try to tell you what it is. But if what it is a tangle of several different forces, you have to be willing to stay there to really learn. Well, here's the thing, Misty. The reason surrender is, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And people often don't have the tool of surrender. But some people have the tool of surrender too much. Surrendering is one tool in your spiritual approach to life. It's one major tool. So each person has to be honest with yourself. Are you good at surrendering when it's time? Surrendering just means letting something die when it's no longer time for that. So you're no longer identifying with patterns in your life, with an understanding of yourself that it's time to let go of. There are critical times when that's crucial, but it's not always. If you just run around going, I surrender all the time, you're not going to get shit done in life, right? So what you need to know is, I have my toolkit, my spiritual awareness. Maybe I need to surrender. Get closer. Ask yourself, what is happening? I can't give you a formula here. This is like, you're going into spiritual territory where it is not possible to just follow someone else. It's just not. And you need to own the fact that models of reality where everybody's following one person and they're all tuned to each other, there's a beauty to that. They could all sing the same song. It sounds great, but you're never going to be able to survive in the wild. We're trying to teach you how to be able to tune into this yourself and understand on your own. So if you just take a tool I give you and just use it all the time, you're going to hurt yourself, right? The circumstances are specific to you. But what you can commit to is, just don't judge too fast. You feel something painful, you feel something uncomfortable, be willing to get closer. Be willing to get closer and ask about it. Be curious. Treat it like a puzzle. All right, Misty. So first of all, don't call it pain. Pain isn't a thing. There's a contrast of stuff happening. So don't call it pain. Just say what's happening. Clearly you don't like it. Clearly it's unpleasant. All unpleasant means is there are different forces going on that don't work well together. That's all you know at first. Might be pain, but wait and see. Yeah, no, totally, Angie. And it's like going in with that questioning. Like you go in and you see what's happening. Now, if you perpetuate a tense dynamic in a certain place in your body, you will drive it to the point of pain and you will damage your body. But it's important to be able to recognize, maybe that whole phenomena started as a spiritual tension to begin with. And if it started as a spiritual contrast, you want to be able to get in there and understand which forces are there, because probably one of them doesn't need to be there anymore. But it's not always obvious which one to let go of. And if you're going in there and kind of identifying with all of them, you can't let go of what you need to let go of. Now, if you push it to the point of exhaustion and you go, fine, I give up. Hey, look, sometimes it works. Sometimes that's the only way to get out of the way and let a process happen. But I assure you, it could be less dramatic over time if you become more conscious of like being able to recognize which things to support, which things to release. You can navigate through and remain present during such releases. So if you have in the past dramatically surrendered, maybe that's because you were fighting way too hard to keep an old part of yourself going. You finally surrendered, it let go, and it worked. It could be misleading to think that it's always that way. No, how about aim for even better? Next time, you want to be even more graceful. Realize when it's time to let something go before you fight a lot to keep it going. Well, a lot of it is about ideas. Ideas have a presence. So when we hold an idea of ourself, the presence of that paradigm, it's here. And our spirit will try to live into that presence. And if they contrast, there you go, you've got tension. Transitions always contain some of that. So I think it's important not to just like aim for a life where you never experience these kind of discomforts. I think it's important to aim for a life where you navigate through them well. We've got another 10 minutes. Throw out some questions. Where is your edge? I want you to define big goals. This practice I posted yesterday, I would really urge you all to consider making it a goal. It's 1 hour of really intense work. It is the best balance of strength, aerobic, and flexibility. It's basically 25 sun salutations where we add poses. And there's a reason sun salutations are beautiful if you approach them the right way. I don't know if you've done them. You've probably done them if you've done some yoga. They're really beautiful if you approach them the right way. And learning about yourself can happen in this context where you're doing a disciplined thing that you do over and over and over again, but each time is different because you're asking yourself, wait, I didn't like that last one. This is the kind of thinking I want you to get to. If you don't like something, that's communication from your spirit. And I want you to be able to say, if I didn't like that, how could I like it more? That'll tell you a lot about what changes to make. Yes. That I love that. In fact, I am a strong look. I can't tell you how many people in my life right now have, made offhanded comments that involve the apocalypse past couple of weeks. Because on the East Coast, we're dealing with all this smoke, right? And we haven't had to deal with this. People on the West Coast have had to deal with this for a while. But on the East Coast, we have to deal with it. So when there's something dramatic happening in the world, it's affecting everyone. Your edge comes when like a lot of people don't want to surrender to the idea that we are as interwoven as we are, because it creates a sense of disempowerment, right? Like, oh, well, if I have to admit that I'm just a part of this bigger thing, then I can't conceive of myself as this free to be whatever I want to be kind of person. It's a paradigm shift to honor that the weather changes us. Now, other people go the other direction and say, I have seasonal affective disorder. Now, I have no tolerance for this. None. Forgive me. I have great compassion for you. I'm not saying you don't feel worse during the winter, but to a very high extent, every extent I've seen, this involves people who aren't willing to change their mindset. They want to be able to be in whatever mood they want to be in, but they can't because the weather's shaping it. So the alternative is to say, look, Norse Vikings used to live in Greenland. When they lived in Greenland, there were 2 months a year when there was almost no light at all. They played chess and told each other poetry. When you work with the constraints that are available, that's your edge. When the winter comes, I like challenging myself to enjoy the cold more. I like going out for a minute in the morning still and breathing the cold air and feeling, when do I stop enjoying it? Now, when I was younger, I tried to stay as long as possible and I didn't enjoy it nearly as much because I was always pushing myself past my edge. This is the metaphor. How can you edge into what's available and still keep joy? And I would include astrology in this. astrological forces, when you understand just the basics, and you just treat it as like, this is happening. Think of it this way. If someone's playing, my instinct was like Michael Jackson, beat it in the room. Like if you hear a song in the room, you could be pissed that song is playing, or you could work with the rhythm of that song. What a lot of people do is they take a certain proportion of their energy to numb out that song. And it works. Nothing says you have to be patterned by astrology. It's just there. It's like energetic music during that season. You could take a proportion of your life force and numb it out, but you've immediately numbed out your ability to be your best, because rather than working with the force that's present, you're trying to block it in order to create a different reality over here that isn't as influenced by that. Oh, it'll work. You'll be able to create a more cocoon over here where you try to generate exactly what you want, but it's never going to be as strong because you just took 20-30% of your energy to block out the force that's just real. Don't do that. That's not your edge. You'll never be your best that way. I love it. And one of my friends is coming out of an extreme depression, starting to use cold dips. I do cold showers fairly regularly, and I'd love to be getting an ice bath. I think this is part of the art. Like, step into extremes. I think this is a really good practice to be a part of your life. If you get used to stepping in, when you go into the cold like that, you're expanding your potential. Rather than saying, I'm going to stop the second I feel a chill, you're learning to broaden your range of where you can live. And I believe that metaphor carries over. So what people will do is, if you're always covering up the second you feel a certain level of chill, you will literally suffer more. But if you expand yourself, you can actively enjoy places where, it used to be a no. We have so much more influence over how we experience phenomena, seemingly external phenomena, than we think. There's a funny story where it's an old Kabbalistic Jewish story. A man goes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I'm going crazy. My wife talks all the time. My kids are always yelling at each other. The dog's barking incessantly, and the cat scratches at the door all day. I cannot handle it. And the rabbi goes, get a chicken and let it live in the kitchen so you can have its eggs every day. The guy's like, okay. So he does that. He goes back. I'm going crazy. Now the chicken's talking. The guy goes, get a goat so you can milk it and have its milk every day and let it live in the dining room. Get a horse and keep it right in the living room so you can easily get on it and go riding. And the guy goes back, he goes, I'm going crazy. Now the horse is neighing, the goat is kicking the door, the chicken's clucking all the time, there's poop everywhere. And the guy goes, okay, put the chicken in the chicken coop outside, put the goat in a stable, put the horse next to it in the stable. The guy comes back and goes, wow, that's a lot better. Life is about perspective. And when we can change our perspective, when we can challenge ourselves by taking on more, we can change our relationship to the same circumstances that used to seem to destroy us. I will see you very soon. Oh, there's something else. What is it? There's a damage in the world right now. There's a very real connection between environmental destruction and our own emotional and spiritual suffering. It's direct if you let yourself understand it this way. People burn too much heat. Why? Because we're scared when it's cold that we'll be too cold. So we attempt to control it too much and keep our houses too warm, warmer than we need them to be, rather than just wearing a hat through the winter. People drive their cars too much because they want to feel in control, that on a whim they can go out and buy whatever they want while things rot in their fridge. This is normal for many, many families. People want the power to drive and visit a friend whenever they think they need to, rather than planning it ahead and perhaps walking, taking the time in between. So when you calculate the sum total of all this extra burning, what you're looking at is spiritual and emotional pain. That's why people make these choices. We keep our house cold. We put on an extra blanket. I wear a hat all through the winter. I love it. I love it. It feels great. I like the briskness. In a house that's too hot, I feel sick. I hate it. It makes me mad. We walk all over the place. I walk everywhere. We didn't have a car for 9 years. Now, I'm not trying to, no judgment here. I'm just saying I live by this approach. We'd have a car for 9 years. We just got a car. We use it with a lot of restraint. We walk constantly. As often as we can, we set aside the time to walk places and build it into our life. When you do this, you take the time on the walk to digest your emotional challenges more intentionally and more consciously. It's a cascade. The reason there are so many fires is because we've been burning too much. Oh, it is that simple. And when we're burning too much, a lot of the fires, oh my God, guys, Central Canada has been raped by the world. It's awful. The tar sands, it's like the biggest tragedy on the planet. There are fires burning all the time from gas seeps that they've left open. There are toxic pits that go for hundreds of miles. And that is the accumulated lust to get over fear. People just lusting to try to do things that distract them from their fear, that involve burning, using electricity, burning, using their car, burning, turning up the heat, burning, leaving massive office buildings empty and heated all night, burning, burning, burning. Why do we do all these things? Because we think we need more than we need. We want more than we need. Think you have to want more than you need. Till you have it all, you can't be free. Society, you crazy breed. Hope you're not lonely without me. Here's the truth. There are plenty of beautiful places on the world. There are plenty of beautiful places on the planet. I got in touch with a blue heron years ago. We locked third eyes. It told me there are lots of places that are safe from humans. Lots of untouched sacred spaces that preserve the essence of the world. And there are plenty of paths for you to walk through and continue to have a beautiful life, a beautiful impact, to tune in to the best possibilities that are true, that are right for you, that are healthy, to be a part of the new world that's birthing. The world is not falling apart in a way that isn't birthing at the same time. The death and the birth are happening at the same time. Which do you want to be a part of? That's the question. That's the edge you can live in. By all means, acknowledge the fear that comes when you can't go outside for days. Be present with it. Grieve. Grieve for the burning. Grieve for the death. Be present in the new life as it's calling you. Be present. Be a part of it. Breathe with it. Ask what you can do so you can live with it as normal.